March 9th, 2023. Daily Bread. Passage: Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 1 to verse 14. Key verse 9. Title: Purify the Church. On that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, and there it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. Our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing. When the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of foreign descent. Before this, Eliashib, the priest, had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. He was closely associated with Tobiah, and he had provided him with a large room formerly used to store the grain offerings and incense and temple articles, and also the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil prescribed for the Levites, musicians and gatekeepers, as well as the contributions for the priest. But while all of this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Xerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Some time later, I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God. I was greatly displeased and threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. I gave orders to purify the rooms, and then I put back into them the equipment of the house of God, with the grain offerings and the incense. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them, and that all the Levites and musicians responsible for their service had gone back to their own fields. So I rebuked the officials and asked them, "Why is the house of God neglected?" Then I called them together and stationed them at their post. All Judah brought the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil into the storerooms. I put Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the storerooms, and made Hanan, son of Zechor, the son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because they were considered trustworthy. They were made responsible for distributing the supplies to their fellow Levites. Remember me for this, my God, and do not blot out what I have so faithfully done for the house of my God and its services. Daily Bread Message. The Israelites went on to read the book of Moses and tried to abide by the law and instructions. Unfortunately, they could not keep up with their decisions for long. Nehemiah had been called back to Babylon after his term as governor of Judea. When he returned to Jerusalem after some years, he saw that the priest in charge of the temple storeroom let Tobiah, who oppressed the restoration work, take a personal space in the storeroom. People had stopped giving tithes and firstfruits as offering to support the house of God. As a result, the temple workers were not being provided for and forced to scatter to provide their living. Nehemiah threw out all of Tobiah's belongings and ordered all rooms in the temple to be purified. The tithes and grain offerings were restored. We cannot depend on our feelings of goodwill to live a life of faith and worship God. We need to trust God's grace and provision and have the disciplines to purify our hearts before Him and practice giving an offering. What is in your heart that needs to be cleared to put God in the center? Prayer. Father, you are my Lord, and I worship you with all my heart. Please help me to have the strength to purify my heart, to be right before you, and serve you without hindrance. One word, we need God's grace to keep pure hearts.